Abusive head trauma, also known as shaken baby syndrome, is the condition that results from the violent shaking of a child. While babies are at the greatest risk, everyone needs to be aware that children as old as 5 can suffer shaking injuries. This violent shaking can cause severe brain damage, resulting in injuries ranging from learning disabilities to blindness or even death. Crying is the #1 reason a baby is shaken. Some babies cry more often or more easily than others. Every infant responds to discomfort and new experiences, but even the most kind and loving caregiver can feel frustrated by a crying baby. Feeling frustrated is normal. Let's hear from Peggy Whalen and George Lithgow, who lost their son Skipper to abusive head trauma.
As Peggy Whalen and George Lithgow get ready for the arrival of a new baby, their son Skipper is never far from their thoughts.
You sort of learn about children as you grow, and I think in many ways it was an opportunity I may not have fully appreciated if I was a father when I was younger.
From the beginning, Skipper captivated and delighted everyone around him. His charm, ready smile, and contagious laugh were part of his personality from the earliest days. But George and Peggy's wish for Skipper was not to be. In early December, while in the care of an informal daycare provider, little Skipper was violently shaken. George remembers how the day began.
It was a rainy day. I remember I was wearing my rain jacket, red rain jacket, and Skipper was wearing a blue plaid Polo Tech hat, so we put that on, and I remember picking him up out of the car and walking into the daycare provider the way we always did. And he got in, he was excited to see Mikey, one of the other boys, and put him down, and they went over and they would like, not really hug, but they went over and sort of like, you know, did stuff with each other. And then I walked around. I would always walk around with them a little bit in the morning, because I first started doing it when we went there because I wanted him to feel comfortable. And I would spend 15, 20 minutes so he could make the transition. But after a while, I just did it because I like to do it. And we walked around for 10 or 15 minutes. We'd just been off for 4 or 5 days with the Thanksgiving holiday. So at one point, he asked to be hugged. So I picked him up, I held him for a hug, and then, you know, we said goodbye. And I always used to kiss him goodbye because it was you never know, is my philosophy. And I just like to do that, so I kissed him goodbye, and then I went off and I went to court for a day.
When I went to pick him up, the sitter lived on a street she lived at the end of the street that curved. She lived right at the corner at a stop sign. And as I came around the curve, I could see there were a lot of people and emergency vehicles, not like ambulances. I think at that point they were probably the cars that have the blue lights on top from the volunteers. And there were a lot of people in the street all down at the end. And I kept hoping it was a neighbor. And her house has a big picture window. And I just kept telling myself that it's probably the neighbor, and I'll get to the house and they'll all be sitting looking out that picture window watching what's going on. And as I pulled up, somebody who was directing traffic tried to wave me on, and I said I need to go into that house and get my son. And he said to me, "Are you Peggy?" And that's when I first started to think that something's wrong, and my heart was pounding, but I still thought she's probably just told them that I'm coming because it's my regular time to come. And I still kept thinking maybe somehow something had happened to her. But I realized the oldest child there was 2 years old, and there was no way one of those kids had called for help. So I parked the car in her driveway. When I got up to the door, a paramedic met me at the door, so I didn't even go in. And he told me that they had just taken my son in an ambulance. They thought it was febrile seizure, and they asked me if he had been sick. And he hadn't been, but I knew that fevers come on very quickly, you can spike very high. He was teething, getting his first molars, and I know sometimes with teething, children get fevers. I also knew that, you know, maybe one of the other boys was sick and he had picked something up. So I was trying to sort of hold on to that idea of febrile seizure.
That day I was in court. And I remember at one point watching the rain clouds moving out, and the sunshine came out, and you could see all this happening out the court window. About an hour later, we got a phone call in the courtroom, which was very unusual, and someone said, "You have to go to it."
And I just couldn't believe that anybody had shaken him. The sitter was always a very calm person. So they arranged for Skipper to be airlifted. He was sedated for that, and they had to intubate him. It's called put him on oxygen. And the collar was put on in case there were any neck or spinal injuries. He was put on a board, strapped onto a board, and all bundled up. And it was just his face showing, really, because it was November 30th. It was very cold. And then we got to Westchester, and they have their own emergency room for pediatric cases. And we were in the emergency room. It's a teaching hospital. There were a lot of people in and out. There was a neurologist that spoke with me, and there was a second CAT scan ordered, and that was, like, the first CAT scan was probably around 6 or 7. The second one was, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 at night, probably 11. And there was significant swelling, and so they told us that it wasn't the bleeding that was so much of a problem, it was the swelling of the brain, and there was nothing they could do to relieve that pressure. The bleeding they could, that's why he was transferred. The bleeding, they could have actually drained some of the bleeding. But the pressure of the brain, they weren't going to be able to relieve at all. And from there, he was admitted to the pediatric ICU unit. And they put a pressure monitor in his brain, and about, I don't know, 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning, the neurologist came out and said that the numbers were, like, way off the scale, and there was nothing they were going to be able to do. And then we spent about 3 days with him on life support before he could be removed from life support and declared dead.
No one knows exactly how many children are injured by shaking each year, but experts estimate that as many as 4,000 babies may suffer from this form of abuse. Dr. Ray Walsh is a pediatric intensive care unit physician who has treated many children with shaken baby syndrome.
Once the brain has been damaged, there's nothing we can do medically to reverse the damage that's been done. The damage is there. There's no magic bullet or medicine we can give that's going to repair the brain.
Taking care of children can be the most satisfying and stimulating job imaginable, but it is at times frustrating and exhausting as well.
It's okay to put a child in a crib for 5 minutes and walk away and just take a deep breath. You know, don't run outside and leave it alone, but just walk away and just take a deep breath. Count to 10 and take 3 deep breaths, and know that it's okay to be frustrated. You know, you're not a bad mommy or you're not a bad child care provider.
I mean, people don't leave children with care providers that look like they're going to shake the baby, or that they're going to hit the baby, or they're going to commit some form of physical abuse. But what they don't realize is that by leaving your child with someone who doesn't realize the danger, you're essentially not taking a step that's really important to protecting the baby. And that is as simple as saying, shaking's dangerous. If you have a problem, give me a call.
I think that we need to change the attitude that having to call the parents is a bad sign. That I think the parents need to change the attitude on that too, but that the daycare provider should definitely feel that if things aren't going right, if they're getting edgy, they should be able to call either the parent or one of the emergency numbers listed. And along with that, the parents have to realize that it doesn't mean the daycare provider's incompetent, that it's probably the best sign if that person is honest enough to call you and say, you need to come and take your child right now. This is, you know, they need to be home.
The death of a child is an overwhelming loss for any family.
There is no such thing really as closure. You try to adapt as best you can, but this will always be with us. And there will always be moments or days where it still doesn't seem real, and that it's hard to believe that it happened. But I don't think you ever get over something like this.
Skipper's story is heartbreaking, but there are steps you can take in your program to prevent or minimize children's distress and lessen the amount of crying before it starts. The best way to minimize or prevent children's stress is to anticipate their needs, know their schedules, and keep them predictable. Be alert to early signs of hunger, sleepiness, or irritability. Provide an environment that's stimulating but not too stimulating, and safe but not restrictive. In every child's day, there will be times to cry. When it happens, try to comfort them immediately. Research shows that babies who are comforted quickly tend to cry less, and babies like to be up on your shoulder, close to your body where it's warm and can hear your breathing and your heart. All children are different, and some can be soothed more quickly than others. Always remember, abusive head trauma is 100% preventable. Take the time to develop your plan and communicate with families.